Ambassador Kethvar had served the Galactic Council for over 3 centuries, but nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for his first encounter with humanity. The briefing files had been sparse, almost dismissive. A young species, barely 50 years into space travel, requesting membership in the Council. Standard procedure dictated a thorough evaluation, cultural exchange, and gradual integration over several decades. What could possibly go wrong with such a primitive civilization? The human delegation's arrival at Station Nexus Prime changed everything. Kethvar watched from the observation deck as their vessel approached the docking bay. Unlike the elegant, flowing designs of Council ships, the human craft appeared brutally functional. Angular hull, plating covered what seemed to be layers upon layers of armor. Weapon ports dotted the surface in patterns that spoke of hard-earned experience rather than aesthetic consideration. The ship moved with purpose, its engines producing a deep, thrumming vibration that resonated through the station's superstructure. Curious design philosophy, muttered his aide, Yilthara, her 4 eyes studying the vessel through the transparent aluminum viewing port. They appeared to prioritize durability over beauty. Kethvar nodded absently, his attention focused on the docking procedure. Human ships, he had been told, required specialized atmospheric mixtures and gravitational settings. The species had evolved on a world they called Earth, a planet that the initial survey teams had classified as a Class 9 death world. The designation alone should have been warning enough. Death worlds were rare in the galaxy, accounting for less than 0.01% of habitable planets. They were characterized by extreme environmental conditions, aggressive native species, and natural disasters that would devastate most civilized worlds within days. That any intelligent life had evolved on such a planet was remarkable. That they had not only survived, but thrived was unprecedented. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that echoed through the station. Kethvar straightened his ceremonial robes and prepared to meet Earth's representatives. Protocol demanded that he greet them personally, though he suspected this would be a brief, formal encounter before passing them to the appropriate subcommittees for evaluation. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. The first figure to emerge was tall by galactic standards, nearly 2 meters in height, with pale skin and short, dark hair. The human moved with a fluid grace that reminded Kethvar of the apex predators on his homeworld. Behind this individual came 4 others, each displaying subtle variations in appearance that suggested genetic diversity far exceeding that of most spacefaring species. Ambassador Kethvar, the lead human said, extending a hand in what the briefing files had indicated was a greeting gesture. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Human Diplomatic Relations. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Kethvar accepted the handshake, immediately noticing the firmness of the grip. Human hands, he realized, were remarkably strong. The briefing files had mentioned their evolution as persistence hunters, but experiencing their physical capabilities firsthand was enlightening. The pleasure is entirely mine, Dr. Vasquez, Kethvar replied in standard galactic. I trust your journey was comfortable as 3 months in hyperspace can be, she responded with what appeared to be humor. Though our ships are built for endurance rather than luxury. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the diplomatic quarters, Kethvar found himself studying his human companions more closely. Their eyes moved constantly, cataloging exits, defensive positions, and potential threats with an efficiency that spoke of ingrained survival instincts. When a maintenance drone suddenly activated nearby, all 5 humans instantly turned toward the sound, their postures shifting into what could only be described as combat readiness before relaxing upon identifying the non-threat. Forgive our caution, Dr. Vasquez explained, noticing his observation. Old habits from our homeworld. Understandable, Kethvar replied, though privately he was beginning to comprehend why Death World species made the Council nervous. I have reviewed the preliminary reports about Earth. It sounds like a challenging environment. One of the other humans, introduced as Colonel Marcus Chun, smiled grimly. Challenging is one word for it. We prefer to think of it as character building. The diplomatic quarters assigned to the human delegation were standard accommodations, comfortable by most species requirements. Kethvar watched as the humans quickly assessed their surroundings, noting security features and escape routes with professional efficiency. Dr. Vasquez noticed his attention. Ambassador, I hope you don't mind my directness, but I sense you have questions about our species that go beyond the standard diplomatic protocols. Kethvar considered his response carefully. In his 3 centuries of service, he had learned to trust his instincts about other species, and his instincts were telling him that these humans represented something entirely new in galactic politics. Indeed, Dr. Vasquez, your species' rapid technological advancement is remarkable. Most civilizations require centuries to develop reliable hyperspace travel. Humanity achieved it in less than 50 years after discovering the underlying principles. Nécessité colonel Chen interjected. Our world has a way of encouraging rapid adaptation. Over the following hours, Kethvar found himself drawn into increasingly detailed conversations with a human delegation. They spoke casually of concepts that would terrify most civilized species: planetary-scale weather systems capable of devastating entire continents, predatory animals that hunted in coordinated packs, geological instability that could reshape landscapes overnight. Yet they discussed these challenges with a matter-of-fact tone of engineers solving technical problems. Our early space program was motivated by survival, Dr. Vasquez explained during their evening meal. We recognized that our planet's environment, while beautiful, was ultimately finite and occasionally hostile. Space exploration represented our insurance policy against extinction-level events. Extinction-level events? Yulthara asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, gamma-ray bursts, climate shifts, another human, Dr. Sarah Kim, listed casually. Earth's geological record shows several mass extinction events. We developed our technology with the assumption that another one was inevitable. Kethvar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Most species develop space travel for exploration, trade, or scientific advancement. Humanity had developed it as a survival mechanism against their own world. Your military technology, he ventured carefully, the reports suggest it is quite advanced for such a young civilization. The humans exchanged glances, and Kethvar sensed he was approaching sensitive territory. Colonel Chun spoke slowly, choosing his words with evident care. Ambassador, I want to be clear about something. Humanity comes to the Galactic Council in peace. We seek membership because we believe cooperation and mutual understanding serve everyone's interests better than isolation or conflict. However, Dr. Vasquez continued, we would be dishonest if we pretended that our history has been entirely peaceful. Our homeworld has shaped us in ways that prioritize survival and adaptation. Those same qualities that helped us overcome Earth's challenges have influenced our approach to technology and defense. The conversation continued late into the station's artificial night cycle. Kethvar learned about human concepts of warfare that seemed to emerge from their planet's harsh realities. They spoke of strategy, tactics, and military philosophy with the same casual expertise they applied to discussing weather patterns or ecosystem management. It became clear that for humans, warfare was simply another environmental challenge to be understood and overcome. Your species has never experienced global warfare? Dr. Kim asked during a lull in the conversation. The thought is incomprehensible, Yilthara responded. Why would civilized beings engage in such destructive behavior? Resource competition, Colonel Chun replied simply. When your world can support billions of individuals, but those individuals require specific resources to survive, conflict becomes inevitable unless you develop alternatives. Such as space exploration, Kethvar observed. Exactly. But the technological and organizational innovations required for space exploration often have dual applications. As the evening progressed, Kethvar began to understand why the initial survey teams have been so unsettled by their encounters with humanity. These beings thought in terms of survival scenarios that would never occur to most civilized species. They planned for contingencies that seemed paranoid to galactic standards, but which, given their homeworld's history, represented prudent preparation. The next morning brought the formal presentation of humanity's application for council membership. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all curious about the newcomers from the death world. Dr. Vasquez took the podium with the same calm confidence she had displayed throughout their previous conversations. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. Humanity comes before you today, seeking membership in the Galactic Council not as supplicants, but as equals ready to contribute to our shared future among the stars. The presentation that followed was unlike anything Kethvar had witnessed in his long career. Rather than focusing on their species' achievements or cultural contributions, the humans presented a comprehensive analysis of galactic civilization's current challenges and their proposed solutions. They had studied council records, identified inefficiencies in trade routes, analyzed resource allocation problems, and developed innovative approaches to common diplomatic issues. Our homeworld has taught us that survival depends on adaptation, cooperation, and the ability to solve problems quickly and effectively, Dr. Vasquez explained. We believe these qualities, refined by our unique evolutionary history, can benefit the entire galactic community. The questions that followed revealed the delegates' mixed reactions to humanity's presentation. Some species representatives seemed intrigued by the innovative solutions the humans proposed. Others appeared concerned by the implications of admitting a Death World species to the Council. Ambassador Zorthe K. of the Hegemony Worlds raised what Kethvar recognized as the central concern. Dr. Vasquez, your species' military capabilities are impressive, perhaps even concerning. How can the Council be certain that humanity's intentions remain peaceful? Dr. Vasquez paused, and, for the first time since their arrival, Kethvar sensed tension among the human delegation. The question struck at the heart of galactic civilization's deepest fear, that a species capable of surviving a death world might also be capable of threatening the peace that had prevailed among the stars for millennia. Ambassador Zorthe, Dr. Vasquez replied slowly, I will not insult your intelligence by claiming that humanity lacks the capability for warfare. Our history and our homeworld challenges have indeed shaped us into a species that understands conflict and defense. However, I would ask you to consider this. We come before you voluntarily, seeking membership in your community. A species with conquest in mind would not request permission to join. They would simply take what they wanted. The silence that followed her words was deafening. Kethvar felt the weight of the moment, recognizing that humanity's acceptance or rejection by the Council would have far-reaching implications for galactic civilization. These beings represented something new, something potentially powerful, and something that challenged the established order simply by existing. Colonel Chin stood and approached the podium, his movements drawing the attention of every delegate in the hall. If I may add something, Dr. Vasquez, he said quietly, humanity has learned that strength without wisdom leads to destruction. Our homeworld has shown us what happens when a species exhausts its environment through conflict and competition. We develop space travel not to escape these lessons, but to apply them on a larger scale. We understand that our capabilities may seem threatening, Dr. Vasquez concluded, but we offer them in service of the common good. Our survival has depended on cooperation, innovation, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. These are the qualities we bring to the Galactic Council. As the human delegation concluded their presentation, Kethvar found himself grappling with questions that had no easy answers. Humanity represented both an opportunity and a potential threat to galactic civilization. Their technological innovations could benefit every species in the Council, but their military capabilities could reshape the balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries. The debate that erupted among the delegates reflected these concerns. Some argued for immediate admission, citing humanity's obvious potential contributions. Others called for extended observation periods, concerned about the long-term implications of accepting a Death World species. A few suggested that humanity's military capabilities made them inherently unsuitable for Council membership. Through it all, the human delegation remained calm and composed, answering questions with patience and providing clarifications when requested. Kethvar noticed that they never became defensive about their capabilities or dismissive of the delegates' concerns. Instead, they acknowledged the legitimacy of the fears while consistently emphasizing their commitment to peaceful cooperation. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out of the assembly hall, Kethvar approached Dr. Vasquez. The weight of his decision as the lead evaluator pressed heavily on his mind. Dr. Vasquez, I have one final question, if you would permit it. Of course, Ambassador. What does humanity fear? The question seemed to catch her off guard, and, for a moment, the composed, diplomatic mask slipped slightly. Ambassador, that is perhaps the most insightful question anyone has asked us during this entire process. She paused, considering her response carefully. We fear irrelevance. We fear becoming complacent. We fear forgetting the lessons our homeworld taught us about the consequences of failure to adapt. But, most of all, we fear that our capabilities might be seen as a threat rather than an asset to the galactic community we wish to join. Kethvar nodded slowly, understanding that her answer revealed more about humanity than volumes of survey reports ever could. These beings feared not external threats, but internal failures. They feared losing the very qualities that had enabled their survival and success. As the human delegation prepared to depart for their temporary quarters, Kethvar realized that his evaluation would shape not just humanity's future, but the future of galactic civilization itself. The Council faced a fundamental choice: embrace change and the potential it represented, or maintain the status quo and risk stagnation. The stars had produced something new in humanity, something that challenged every assumption about civilized behavior and peaceful coexistence. Whether that something would prove to be salvation or destruction remained to be seen, but Kethvar was beginning to suspect that the galaxy would never be the same again. That night, as he prepared his preliminary report, Kethvar found himself returning to Dr. Vasquez's final words. Humanity feared irrelevance, feared being seen as a threat rather than an ally. Yet their very presence challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic peace had been built. They were living proof that survival sometimes required capabilities that made others uncomfortable. The question facing the Council was whether they possessed the wisdom to distinguish between capability and intent, between strength and aggression. Humanity had survived their death world by developing both the tools and the wisdom to use them responsibly. Whether galactic civilization possessed similar wisdom remained to be tested. As Kethvar sealed his quarters for the night, he could not shake the feeling that this evaluation would determine far more than humanity's membership status. It would determine whether the galaxy was ready to evolve, to embrace new possibilities and challenges, or whether it would retreat into the comfortable certainty of the past. The humans slept peacefully in their quarters, but Kethvar remained awake, wrestling with the implications of his decision. Outside his window, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the civilizations that had emerged beneath their light. Yet somehow, he sensed that even the stars were waiting to see what choice the Galactic Council would make regarding these remarkable beings from the death world called Earth. The council chambers buzzed with quiet conversation as delegates filtered in for the morning session. Kethvar had spent the night reviewing his notes and the preliminary reports from other evaluation teams. The human delegation had undergone psychological assessments, cultural compatibility studies, and technological evaluations. The results painted a complex picture of species that defied easy categorization. Dr. Vasquez and her team entered the chambers precisely at the appointed time, their punctuality another small detail that spoke to their disciplined nature. Kethvar watched as they took their designated seats, noting how they positioned themselves to maintain visual contact with all exits while appearing completely relaxed. Even their body language told a story of constant awareness, disguised as casual confidence. The chair recognizes Ambassador Kethvar for presentation of the preliminary evaluation, announced Prime Counselor Veltar, her crystalline voice resonating through the hall's acoustic dampeners. Kethvar rose from his seat, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The decision he was about to present would echo through galactic history, and he was acutely aware of the responsibility that entailed. Honored counselors, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I have completed my preliminary evaluation of the human application for council membership. My findings are complex. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Evaluations were typically straightforward affairs, with clear recommendations for acceptance, rejection, or additional observation periods. Complex was not a word that appeared often in these reports. Humanity presents us with a unique challenge, Kethvar continued. They possess technological capabilities that rival species with centuries more experience in space travel. Their cultural adaptability suggests they could integrate successfully with existing council protocols. Their scientific innovations have already proven valuable in addressing several long-standing technical challenges. Ambassador Zorthe K. leaned forward in his seat. Yet I sense a reservation in your tone, Ambassador Kethvar. Indeed, there is cause for careful consideration, Kethvar acknowledged. Humanity's evolutionary background has produced a species with capabilities that exceed standard parameters for council membership. Their military technology, strategic thinking, and survival instincts represent variables that have not previously been factored into our admission criteria. Dr. Vasquez requested permission to address the council, and Prime Counselor Veltar granted it with a graceful gesture. "Honorable delegates," Dr. Vasquez said as she stood, "I believe Ambassador Kethvar's observations reflect a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of capability versus intent. Humanity has developed certain abilities out of necessity, not aggression. We offer these capabilities in service of the greater good, not as threats to existing order." "How can we be certain of that distinction?" asked Counselor Thyven of the Peaceful World Alliance. "Your species' history contains numerous examples of technological advancement driven by military competition." Colonel Chen rose to stand beside Dr. Vasquez. "Counselor Thyven raises a valid concern. Yes, human history includes warfare and conflict, but it also includes an unbroken pattern of learning from those conflicts and developing better solutions. Our advancement to space travel represented our species' recognition that competition for resources on a single world was ultimately self-destructive. We didn't master space travel to escape our problems," added Dr. Kim. "We mastered it to solve them on a larger scale." Kethvar found himself impressed by the humans' willingness to address difficult questions directly rather than deflecting or minimizing their significance. It spoke to a cultural maturity that was often lacking in first-contact situations. "The evaluation team has prepared a series of scenarios to test human responses to various galactic challenges," Kethvar announced. "With the Council's permission, I would like to present these scenarios and observe how our applicant handled them." The first scenario involved a trade dispute between two member species over shipping route access. The conflict had been simmering for decades without resolution, as both sides possessed valid claims under existing treaties. Dr. Vasquez studied the presented data for several minutes before responding. "The underlying issue appears to be inefficient resource allocation rather than genuine scarcity," she observed. "Both species are competing for the same shipping lanes because current routes were established before improvements in hyperspace navigation technology. By updating the routing protocols and implementing dynamic traffic management, both species could achieve their objectives without conflict." Her proposed solution was elegant and practical, addressing root causes rather than symptoms. More importantly, it demonstrated human ability to think systematically about complex problems. The second scenario presented a more challenging situation: a member species requesting council intervention in a civil war that threatened to destabilize an entire sector. Traditional council policy emphasized non-interference in internal affairs, but the humanitarian crisis demanded action. Colonel Chun took the lead on this scenario. "The principle of non-interference is important for maintaining council legitimacy, but it cannot become an excuse for allowing preventable suffering. I would recommend a graduated response. First, offering humanitarian aid to refugees and non-combatants. Second, facilitating dialogue between the warring factions. And third, if necessary, limited intervention to protect civilian populations. Your third option involves military action," Counselor Zorthike pointed out. "How does this align with your stated commitment to peaceful solutions?" "Counselor, sometimes peace requires strength," Dr. Vasquez interjected. "Our homeworld taught us that predators respect boundaries only when those boundaries are enforced. A council that cannot protect the innocent becomes irrelevant to those who need protection most." The answer sent another ripple of concern through the assembly. Humanity's willingness to consider military intervention, even for humanitarian purposes, challenged the Council's traditional approach to conflict resolution. The third scenario proved to be the most revealing. The evaluation team presented a situation where an unknown alien force had destroyed several Council exploration vessels in uncharted space. No communication had been established, and the attackers' motives remained unclear. How should the Council respond? The human delegation conferred quietly for several minutes before Dr. Vasquez addressed the assembly. This scenario requires a multi-pronged approach. First, we need intelligence. Deploy stealth reconnaissance to gather information about these attackers' capabilities, motivations, and technological level. Second, attempt communication using every available method, including mathematical concepts, scientific principles, and even artistic expressions. Third, prepare defensive measures to protect Council territories and vessels. And if communication fails, ask Prime Counselor Veltar. Colonel Chin's expression grew serious. If diplomatic contact fails and the attacks continue, then the Council must be prepared to defend itself and its member species. Sometimes the only language predators understand is strength. You speak of defense, but your tone suggests offense. Observe Ambassador Keltam of the Harmonious Collective. Ambassador, Dr. Vasquez replied, there is a difference between seeking conflict and being prepared for it when forced upon you. Our homeworld's history taught us that those who are unprepared for violence often become its victims. We prefer peace, but we will not achieve it by pretending that threats do not exist. The scenarios continued throughout the morning session, each one revealing different aspects of human thinking and problem-solving approaches. In every case, the human solutions demonstrated sophistication, innovation, and a willingness to consider options that other species might find uncomfortable. During the midday recess, Kethvar found himself in conversation with several other ambassadors. The consensus was clear. Humanity possessed remarkable capabilities and insights that could benefit the entire Council. However, their approaches to conflict resolution and their willingness to consider military options made many delegates nervous. They think like warriors, muttered Ambassador Zorthke during an informal gathering. Even their peaceful solutions contain implicit threats. Or perhaps they think like survivors, Kethvar offered. Their proposals consistently prioritize effectiveness over comfort. They suggest solutions that work rather than solutions that feel safe. The afternoon session focused on humanity's technological contributions to galactic civilization. Dr. Kim presented innovations in hyperspace navigation, energy generation, and material science that represented significant advances over existing Council capabilities. The technologies were impressive, but their potential military applications were obvious to anyone with strategic awareness. Your hyperspace communication arrays could revolutionize interstellar coordination, observed Counselor Melvina. They could also provide unprecedented intelligence-gathering capabilities. True, Dr. Kim acknowledged. Like most powerful technologies, they have dual applications. The question is not whether they could be misused, but whether humanity can be trusted to use them responsibly. And how do we make that determination? Asked Prime Counsel Veltar. Dr. Vasquez stood once again. By observing our actions rather than fearing our capabilities. Humanity offers these technologies freely to the Council, not as bargaining chips or weapons, but as contributions to our shared future. Our willingness to share our most advanced innovations demonstrates our commitment to collective benefit rather than individual advantage. The logic was sound, but Kethvar could sense the continued unease among many delegates. Humanity's gifts came with implications that challenged the Council's fundamental assumptions about power and security. As the afternoon progressed, additional scenarios tested human responses to various galactic challenges. Economic crises, environmental disasters, diplomatic deadlocks, and resource shortages all received the same systematic analysis and innovative solutions. In each case, the humans demonstrated an ability to think beyond traditional parameters and propose approaches that others had not considered. Yet with each innovative solution, the underlying pattern became clearer. Humanity approached every problem with the assumption that failure was unacceptable and that survival might require uncomfortable choices. They planned for contingencies that other species preferred to ignore and prepared for challenges that optimistic civilizations hoped would never arise. During a brief recess, Kethvar found himself alone with Dr. Vasquez in a quiet corner of the diplomatic lounge. Away from the formal proceedings, she seemed more relaxed, though her eyes continued their constant surveillance of the environment. Dr. Vasquez, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Ambassador. What do you believe will happen if the Council rejects humanity's application? She considered the question carefully before responding. Honestly, humanity will continue to expand into space regardless of Council approval. Our survival instincts won't allow us to remain confined to a single world, especially knowing what we know about existential risks. We would prefer to do so as part of a larger galactic community, but we will not allow bureaucratic processes to determine our species' fate. That sounds remarkably like a threat. Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. Ambassador, It's simply a statement of reality. A species that has survived what we have survived does not surrender control over its destiny to others, regardless of how well-intentioned those others might be. We seek partnership, not subjugation. Her words crystallized something that had been bothering Kethvar throughout the evaluation process. Humanity was not requesting permission to join galactic civilization. They were offering to participate in it. The distinction was subtle but profound. If the Council were to approve your application with conditions or restrictions, how would humanity respond? That would depend on the nature of those conditions, she replied. We are willing to abide by Council laws and protocols, but we will not accept limitations that compromise our ability to ensure our species' survival and growth. As the formal sessions resumed, Kethvar began to understand why humanity's application had generated such intense debate. They represented a fundamental challenge to the Council's traditional approach to new member integration. Previous applicants had sought membership for trade benefits, scientific exchange, or cultural interaction. Humanity sought membership as equals who happened to possess capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. The final scenario of the day presented the most challenging situation yet. A member species had developed technology capable of destroying entire star systems and was threatening to use it unless specific demands were met. How should the Council respond? The human delegation's response was swift and uncompromising. Colonel Chun outlined a strategy that combined diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and, if necessary, preemptive military action to prevent the threatened destruction. The plan was comprehensive, decisive, and absolutely ruthless in its efficiency. You advocate attacking a council member, Counselor Thiven observed, his voice filled with horror. We advocate preventing genocide, Dr. Vasquez corrected. When a civilization threatens to destroy star systems, diplomatic niceties become secondary to survival imperatives. The Council's primary responsibility is to protect its member species, not to preserve the feelings of those who would commit mass murder. The silence that followed was profound. Humanity had just advocated for everything that galactic civilization had spent millennia trying to avoid: preemptive warfare, unilateral action, and the use of force against fellow council members. Yet as delegates began to process the scenario more carefully, many realized that the human solution, while shocking, was also the only realistic approach to such an extreme threat. Traditional diplomatic methods would be inadequate when facing opponents willing to commit stellar genocide. Your proposed response raises serious questions about proportionality and escalation, Prime Counselor Veltar observed. Counselor, Colonel Chun replied, when facing an opponent willing to destroy entire star systems, the concept of proportional response becomes meaningless. Such threats can only be deterred by demonstrating that they will not be tolerated under any circumstances. As the day's sessions concluded, Kethvar found himself grappling with the implications of everything he had witnessed. Humanity had demonstrated remarkable intelligence, innovative thinking, and sophisticated problem-solving abilities. They had also revealed a capacity for decisive action that challenged every assumption about civilized behavior. The evening meal provided an opportunity for informal conversation between delegates and the human representatives. Kethvar observed these interactions carefully, noting how different species reacted to humanity's unique perspective on galactic challenges. Some delegates were clearly intrigued by human innovations and approaches. The technological collective's representatives engaged Dr. Kim in detailed discussions about hyperspace theory and energy generation. The Explorers Guild questioned Dr. Vasquez extensively about human expansion plans and resource requirements. Other delegates remained visibly uncomfortable with humanity's presence. The Peaceful Worlds Alliance maintained polite but distant interactions, while the Harmony Council's representatives seemed genuinely disturbed by humanity's willingness to consider violent solutions to diplomatic problems. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Vasquez approached him during a lull in the evening's activities. I wanted to thank you for the thoroughness of your evaluation process. Whether the Council ultimately accepts or rejects our application, we appreciate the serious consideration you have given our case. Dr. Vasquez, I must ask you directly, does humanity understand the concerns their application has raised among Council members? Absolutely, she replied without hesitation. We understand that our capabilities and our willingness to use them make many species nervous. But, Ambassador, we would rather be feared for our strength than pitted for our weakness. Our homeworld taught us that the universe is not always kind to those who cannot defend themselves. Yet the Council has maintained peace for over a millennium without relying on such direct approaches to conflict resolution. Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. The Council has maintained peace within its borders by establishing clear rules and mutual benefits that make conflict counterproductive. But what happens when you encounter species that do not share those values? What happens when you face threats that cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with? Kethvar realized she was asking the fundamental question that humanity's application forced the Council to confront. Galactic civilization had flourished in the absence of existential threats, but that absence was not guaranteed to continue forever. Humanity represented both a reminder of that reality and a potential solution to challenges that had not yet emerged. Perhaps, he said slowly, the question is not whether the galaxy needs humanity, but whether humanity can coexist with a civilization that has not learned the lessons that your homeworld taught you. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since their initial meeting, Kethvar saw genuine warmth in her expression. Ambassador, that may be the most insightful observation anyone has made during this entire process. The challenge works both ways. We hope that the Council can accept what we are while helping us become something better. As the evening concluded and delegates began retiring to their quarters, Kethvar remained in the lounge, contemplating the decision that lay before him. His recommendation would carry significant weight with the Council, and he was increasingly certain that this decision would determine far more than humanity's membership status. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, though few recognized it yet. Humanity represented evolution, adaptation, and change. Their acceptance would signal the Council's willingness to embrace new possibilities and challenges. Their rejection would preserve the status quo, but might also doom galactic civilization to stagnation in the face of future threats. Kethvar thought about Dr. Vasquez's words regarding humanity's fears. They feared irrelevance, complacency, and the loss of the qualities that had enabled their survival. Perhaps, he realized, those fears were exactly what galactic civilization needed to hear. The stars continued their eternal dance beyond the station's viewports, indifferent to the struggles of the civilizations that sought meaning among their light. Yet Kethvar could not shake the feeling that something fundamental was changing in the galaxy, something that would determine whether those civilizations would continue to thrive or whether they would become footnotes in the cosmic story of species that failed to adapt when change became necessary. Tomorrow would bring the final evaluation session and his formal recommendation to the Council. As he prepared for sleep, Kethvar found himself hoping that he possessed the wisdom to make the right choice for all the species depending on his judgment. The final day of evaluation dawned with an atmosphere of tension that permeated the entire station. Word had spread throughout the diplomatic community that the human application represented something unprecedented in Council history. Representatives from dozens of species had arrived overnight, seeking to observe the proceedings that would determine not just humanity's fate, but potentially the future direction of galactic civilization. Kethvar reviewed his notes one final time before entering the Council chambers. The evaluation had revealed layers of complexity that he struggled to fully comprehend. Humanity represented both the greatest opportunity and the greatest risk the Council had ever faced. Their technological innovations could usher in a new era of prosperity and exploration, while their military capabilities could destabilize the careful balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries. The morning session began with testimony from various evaluation teams. The Cultural Assessment Division reported that human value systems were compatible with Council principles, though their individualistic tendencies and competitive nature marked them as outliers among member species. The Technological Review Board praised human innovations while expressing concerns about the potential military applications of their discoveries. Dr. Yilthara presented the psychological evaluation results, her four eyes betraying uncertainty as she addressed the assembly. The human delegation displays remarkable mental resilience and adaptive capacity. However, their psychological profiles reveal stress response patterns consistent with constant environmental threat assessment. They process peaceful situations through analytical frameworks designed for survival scenarios. Is this assessment meant to suggest instability? Asked Counselor Thiven. Not instability, Dr. Yilthara clarified. Rather, It suggests a fundamental difference in cognitive processing. Where most civilized species have evolved to assume safety unless proven otherwise, humans appear to assume danger unless proven otherwise. This creates a species-wide tendency toward preparedness that manifests as strategic thinking and contingency planning. Ambassador Zorthake leaned forward in his seat. Dr. Yilthara, in your professional opinion, does this psychological profile suggest that humans are inherently aggressive? The pause that followed was lengthy, as Dr. Yilthara considered her response carefully. Ambassador, aggression implies the initiation of conflict for personal gain. The human psychological profile suggests something different, a deep-seated belief that conflict is inevitable and that survival depends on being better prepared than one's opponents. A distinction without a difference, muttered Counselor Melvina. Dr. Vasquez requested permission to address this characterization. Counselor, if I may offer a clarification, our homeworld taught us that the universe is fundamentally competitive. Resources are finite, environments change, and species must adapt or perish. This does not make us aggressive. It makes us realistic about the nature of existence. Yet your solutions consistently involve the threat or use of force, Counselor Thivan observed. Because force is the ultimate arbiter of disputes, Colonel Chun interjected. Diplomacy works only when all parties agree to abide by negotiated solutions. When that agreement breaks down, something else must enforce the outcome. We prefer that something else to be overwhelming superior force applied quickly and decisively rather than prolonged conflict that causes unnecessary suffering. The exchange crystallized the fundamental tension surrounding humanity's application. Their approach to problem-solving was simultaneously logical and disturbing, practical and threatening. They spoke of violence with the same matter-of-fact tone that other species use to discuss trade negotiations or scientific research. Prime Counselor Veltar called for the presentation of the final evaluation scenario, one that had been designed specifically to test humanity's ultimate loyalties and decision-making processes. The scenario was deliberately extreme, designed to force impossible choices that would reveal core values. The situation is as follows, announced Keth Var as he activated the holographic display. A previously unknown alien species has launched surprise attacks against Council worlds. Their technology appears to be decades ahead of our own, and initial resistance has failed catastrophically. 3 Council member species have been completely destroyed, their homeworlds rendered uninhabitable. The holographic display showed star charts marked with zones of destruction spreading through Council space. The scope of the simulated catastrophe was staggering, representing the deaths of billions of sentient beings. Intelligence reports suggest that the attackers are systematically targeting Council members in order of their perceived strategic value. Humanity, as the newest and most technologically advanced member, would likely be among the first targets. However, Earth's location outside the current attack vector provides a temporary window of safety. Kethvar paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. The scenario question is this: given limited resources and time constraints, how should humanity respond? Do they commit their military capabilities to defending existing Council members at significant risk to their own survival? Or do they prioritize their own security and prepare Earth's defenses? The human delegation conferred quietly for several minutes, their discussion too subdued for the translation systems to capture. Finally, Dr. Vasquez stood to address the assembly. This scenario forces a choice between self-preservation and collective responsibility. It is designed to determine whether humanity's survival instincts override our commitment to the galactic community. Indeed, confirmed Kethvar. How do you resolve this dilemma? Dr. Vasquez's response was immediate and unequivocal. Humanity chooses to fight. We commit our forces to the defense of Council space, even knowing that this may result in our own destruction. The silence that followed was absolute. Delegates who had spent days questioning humanity's militaristic tendencies suddenly found themselves grappling with the implications of a species willing to risk extinction for strangers. Why? Asked Prime Counselor Veltar, her crystalline voice carrying genuine confusion. Colonel Chen rose to stand beside Dr. Vasquez. Because isolation is not survival. If this enemy can destroy entire Council species, they can eventually destroy humanity as well. Our best chance of survival lies in standing together, even if individual battles seem hopeless. Moreover, Dr. Vasquez continued, our homeworld taught us that predators respect only strength. A council that abandons its members when threatened demonstrates weakness that invites further aggression. By fighting back immediately and decisively, we signal that conquest comes with unacceptable costs. Ambassador Zorth K. shook his head in apparent disbelief. You would risk everything for species you have known for mere days. Ambassador, Dr. Vasquez replied, we would risk everything for the principle that civilized species stand together against extinction. Today it's other council members under threat. Tomorrow it could be us. The principle matters more than the specific circumstances. Even if resistance appears futile, pressed Counselor Thyven. Especially if resistance appears futile, Colonel Chen answered. Predators are deterred by the knowledge that their victims will inflict unacceptable costs, even in defeat. A reputation for fierce resistance protects far more effectively than any single military victory. Kethvar found himself deeply moved by humanity's response to the scenario. They had been presented with a choice between pragmatic self-preservation and idealistic sacrifice, and they had chosen sacrifice without hesitation. More importantly, they had articulated a philosophical framework that reframed the choice entirely. Your response suggests that you view council membership as more than a trade agreement or diplomatic convenience. Observe Prime Counselor Veltar. Council membership represents humanity's commitment to the principle that intelligent species can transcend their individual limitations through cooperation, Dr. Vasquez explained. That principle is worth defending, even at the cost of our own existence. The morning session continued with detailed discussions of humanity's strategic proposals for the hypothetical crisis. Their plans demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both conventional and unconventional warfare, combined with innovative approaches to resource allocation and coalition building. Most striking was their assumption that victory would require sacrifice from every council member, not just humanity. During the midday recess, Kethvar observed numerous quiet conversations between delegates and human representatives. The final scenario had apparently shifted perceptions significantly. Species that had viewed humanity as potentially threatening now seemed to be reconsidering their assessments. Ambassador Keltam of the Harmonious Collective approached Dr. Vasquez during the informal meal period. Dr. Vasquez, I must admit that your response to the final scenario has challenged my assumptions about your species' motivations. How so, Ambassador? I had assumed that your military capabilities reflected aggressive intentions. Your willingness to sacrifice those capabilities for strangers suggests different priorities than I had anticipated. Dr. Vasquez smiled warmly. Ambassador, strength without purpose is merely destruction. Our homeworld taught us to be strong, but our evolution towards spaceflight taught us why strength matters. We did not master the stars to conquer them, but to defend them. Similar conversations were occurring throughout the dining area. The technological collective's representatives were engaging Colonel Chun in discussions about defensive strategies and coalition tactics. Even the Peaceful World Alliance seemed to be warming to humanity's presence, though their discomfort with military solutions remained evident. The afternoon session focused on the practical implications of accepting humanity into the Council. Integration protocols, committee assignments, and resource-sharing agreements required extensive discussion. Throughout these mundane negotiations, however, the fundamental question remained unresolved. Could galactic civilization accept a member species whose capabilities and philosophy challenged existing norms? The question before us is not whether humanity can benefit the Council, observed Ambassador Malvina during a late afternoon debate. Their technological contributions and strategic insights are obviously valuable. The question is whether their approach to problem-solving is compatible with our commitment to peaceful solutions. Dr. Vasquez requested permission to address this concern directly. Ambassador Malvina raises the central issue that has defined these proceedings. I would like to offer a perspective that might clarify our position. Please proceed, Prime Counselor Veltar acknowledged. The Council has achieved remarkable success in maintaining peace among diverse species through diplomacy, trade incentives, and mutual benefit frameworks. This approach works because all current Council members share certain fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilized behavior. Dr. Vasquez paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. However, the universe is vast, and The Council has encountered only a tiny fraction of the intelligent species that exist among the stars. Not all of those species will share your assumptions about civilized behavior. Some may view the Council's peaceful nature as weakness to be exploited rather than strength to be respected. Are you suggesting that our peaceful approach is flawed? Asked Counselor Thyvin, a note of offense in his voice. Not flawed, but incomplete, Dr. Vasquez replied diplomatically. Peace through strength requires both the desire for peaceful solutions and the capability to enforce them when peaceful solutions fail. Humanity offers the Council both perspectives, the wisdom to choose peace when possible and the strength to defend it when necessary. Colonel Chin stepped forward to support her argument. The Council's greatest achievement is not the absence of conflict, but the creation of a framework where conflict serves no rational purpose. Maintaining that framework requires ensuring that potential aggressors understand the costs of challenging it. You speak of potential aggressors as if conflict is inevitable, observed Ambassador Keltam. Ambassador, conflict is always possible, Dr. Vasquez responded. The question is whether civilized species prepare for that possibility or pretend it cannot occur. Our homeworld taught us that those who prepare for conflict are less likely to experience it than those who assume it will never come. As the afternoon session drew toward its conclusion, Kethvar realized that the debate had evolved beyond simple acceptance or rejection of humanity's application. The Council was grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of galactic civilization and its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Ambassador Kethvar, Prime Counselor Veltar announced, the time has come for your formal recommendation regarding humanity's application for Council membership. Kethvar rose from his seat, feeling the weight of history settling upon his shoulders. Every eye in the chamber focused on him as he prepared to deliver the decision that would shape the future of both humanity and galactic civilization. Honorable counselors, I have conducted the most thorough evaluation of any membership application in Council history. I have tested humanity's capabilities, challenged their motivations, and explored their compatibility with our existing frameworks of cooperation. The chamber remained silent as he continued. Humanity represents something unprecedented in our experience. They are simultaneously the most capable and most concerning applicant species we have encountered. Their technological innovations could revolutionize galactic civilization, while their military capabilities could destabilize the balance of power that has maintained peace for centuries. Ambassador Zorthke leaned forward expectantly, while other delegates shifted nervously in their seats. However, Kethvar continued, the evaluation has revealed something profound about both humanity and ourselves. In testing their responses to extreme scenarios, we have been forced to confront the limitations of our own assumptions about civilized behavior. He activated the holographic display, showing a comprehensive summary of the evaluation results. Humanity consistently demonstrates that strength and wisdom are not mutually exclusive. They approach every challenge with the assumption that failure is unacceptable and that survival may require difficult choices. Most importantly, they have shown themselves willing to sacrifice their own interests for the greater good of the galactic community. Prime Counselor Veltar's crystalline features reflected the chamber's lighting as she awaited his conclusion. Therefore, Kethvar announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, I recommend conditional acceptance of humanity's application for Council membership. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some delegates appeared relieved, others concerned, and still others seemed genuinely shocked by the recommendation. Dr. Vasquez and her delegation remained composed, though Kethvar noticed a subtle relaxation in their postures. The conditions for membership are as follows. Kethvar continued over the murmur of conversation. First, humanity will undergo a phased integration process lasting 5 standard years, during which their council voting rights will be limited to matters directly affecting their interests. Second, human military capabilities will be subject to council oversight and may only be deployed with explicit council authorization. Third, humanity will share all defensive technologies with council members to ensure that their capabilities serve collective rather than individual interests. These conditions are reasonable and acceptable, Dr. Vasquez responded immediately. Humanity agrees to abide by them in the spirit of our commitment to the galactic community. Prime Counselor Veltar, called for a formal vote on Kethvar's recommendation. The ballot was conducted electronically, with each delegate's vote recorded anonymously to prevent political pressure or retaliation. As the votes were tallied, Kethvar reflected on the extraordinary nature of the proceedings. Humanity had forced the Council to examine its own assumptions about strength, security, and civilized behavior. Regardless of the vote's outcome, galactic civilization had been changed by this encounter with beings who refused to fit existing categories. The final tally appeared on the Chamber's main display: 847 votes in favor, 203 votes against, with 94 abstentions. Humanity's application had been approved by a substantial margin, though the significant minority opposition reflected the deep concerns that their membership had raised. The Council hereby welcomes humanity as a conditional member, subject to the terms outlined by Ambassador Kethvar. Prime Counselor Veltar announced formally. Dr. Vasquez stood and bowed deeply to the assembled delegates. On behalf of humanity, I express our profound gratitude for this opportunity to contribute to the galactic community. We pledge to honor the trust you have placed in us and to prove worthy of the confidence reflected in today's vote. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Kethvar found himself approached by representatives from various species. Some expressed confidence in his decision, while others voiced continuing reservations about humanity's integration into council structures. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Vasquez approached as the crowd thinned. I wanted to thank you personally for the fairness and thoroughness of your evaluation. Your conditions for membership demonstrate wisdom that serves both humanity's interests and the Council's needs. Dr. Vasquez, I hope that my assessment proves correct and that humanity's membership benefits all species in the galactic community. I believe it will, she replied confidently. But more than that, I believe humanity's membership will help the Council prepare for challenges that none of us can yet imagine. As the human delegation departed for their temporary quarters, Kethvar remained in the empty chamber, contemplating the implications of the day's decision. Humanity had been accepted into the galactic community, but their integration would test the Council's flexibility and wisdom in ways that had never been necessary before. The stars beyond the chamber's viewports continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the civilizations that sought meaning among their light. Yet Kethvar could not escape the feeling that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Humanity's acceptance marked the beginning of a new era, one that would require all species to adapt to new realities and possibilities. Whether that new era would bring unprecedented prosperity or unforeseen challenges remained to be determined. But as Kethvar sealed his final report on humanity's evaluation, he felt confident that the Council had made the right choice. The galaxy needed species capable of both wisdom and strength, both cooperation and determination. Humanity offered all of these qualities, along with the hard-earned knowledge that survival sometimes required uncomfortable choices. As the Council moved forward into an uncertain future, those qualities might prove to be exactly what galactic civilization needed to not just survive, but thrive among the stars. 2 years had passed since humanity's conditional acceptance into the Galactic Council, and Kethvar had observed their integration with fascination and growing concern. The humans had exceeded every expectation regarding their contributions to galactic civilization. Their technological innovations had revolutionized interstellar communication. Their strategic insights had resolved 3 major diplomatic crises, and their scientific research had led to breakthroughs in multiple fields. Yet something was changing in the galaxy beyond the Council's traditional boundaries. Reports from deep space exploration vessels spoke of unusual energy signatures, ships that appeared and vanished without explanation, and communication signals that followed no known patterns. The Council's response had been typically measured: increased surveillance, diplomatic inquiries through known channels, and careful documentation of anomalous events. Humanity's response had been characteristically different. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Vasquez requested during a routine integration review meeting, I need to bring a matter to your attention that may require Council consideration. They were meeting in Kethvar's office aboard Station Nexus Prime, the same location where humanity's evaluation had begun 2 years earlier. Dr. Vasquez appeared unchanged by her time among the stars, still displaying the same calm confidence and constant awareness that had marked her species from their first encounter. Please proceed, Dr. Vasquez. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected patterns in the recent anomalous readings that suggest coordinated intelligence rather than natural phenomena. We believe the galaxy may be experiencing reconnaissance activities by an unknown species. Kethvar's exoskeleton shifted slightly, an involuntary response to stress that Dr. Vasquez had learned to recognize during their extended interactions. Your evidence for this assessment? Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing star charts dotted with energy signatures and movement patterns. The anomalies follow logical exploration patterns, systematically mapping council space while avoiding direct contact. The energy signatures are consistent with advanced stealth technology, and the coordination suggests a unified command structure. The Council's Exploration Division has classified these events as natural phenomena requiring further study, Kethvar observed carefully. With respect, Ambassador, the Council's classification reflects wishful thinking rather than strategic analysis. Our homeworld taught us to recognize the difference between random events and purposeful action. This is purposeful action. Kethvar studied the displayed data, noting details that the official council reports had either minimized or ignored entirely. The patterns were indeed suspicious when viewed through the analytical framework that humanity consistently applied to galactic challenges. Assuming your assessment is correct, what do you propose? Enhanced surveillance using human stealth technology, preparation of defensive measures for critical council worlds, and development of protocols for first contact scenarios that may not follow traditional diplomatic patterns. The suggestions were logical and practical, but they also represented a level of militaristic thinking that made many council members uncomfortable. Humanity's conditional membership had required them to seek council authorization for military deployments, but their strategic planning continued to operate on assumptions that challenge galactic civilization's optimistic worldview. Dr. Vasquez, I must point out that your proposals assume hostile intent without evidence of actual aggression. Ambassador, our homeworld taught us that species capable of advanced stealth technology and systematic reconnaissance are species preparing for something more significant than casual exploration. The question is whether we prepare for that possibility or wait to see what their intentions might be. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from the Council's Emergency Response Division. Prime Counselor Veltar's image appeared in the office's communication array, her crystalline features reflecting unusual agitation. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Vasquez, I need you both in the emergency session chamber immediately. We have a developing situation that requires immediate attention. The emergency session chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from across the galaxy gathered to address the crisis. Kethvar and Dr. Vasquez took their assigned positions as the main holographic display activated, showing real-time data from the outer edges of council space. At approximately 0800 hours standard time, the exploration vessel Harmony's Quest was destroyed while investigating anomalous energy readings in the Kepler sector, Prime Counselor Veltar announced. There were no survivors among the 43 crew members representing 7 different species. The holographic display showed the vessel's final moments, a brief, brilliant explosion that left no debris and no trace of the advanced exploration ship that had been conducting routine scientific surveys. Initial analysis suggests weapon technology far exceeding any known council capabilities, continued the Prime Counselor. The destruction was instantaneous and complete, leaving no opportunity for distress signals or defensive action. Ambassador Zorthake leaned forward in his seat, his features reflecting the concern shared by many delegates. Prime Counselor, do we have any information regarding the identity of the attackers? Negative. Long-range sensors detected no hostile vessels in the area before or after the destruction. Whatever technology was responsible operated beyond our detection capabilities. Dr. Vasquez requested permission to address the assembly. Honorable delegates, this attack confirms the intelligence assessments that humanity has been developing regarding the anomalous activities in council space. We are dealing with a species possessing technology significantly advanced beyond our own, operating with stealth capabilities that render them effectively invisible to our sensors. Dr. Vasquez, Counselor Thivin interrupted. You speak as if you anticipated this attack. Counselor, we anticipated the possibility of hostile contact based on observed reconnaissance patterns. The destruction of Harmony's Quest represents escalation from passive observation to active aggression. Prime Counselor Veltar activated additional displays showing tactical analysis of the attack. The Council's Defense Coordination Division has prepared several response options for consideration. The options presented were typical of Council decision-making: increased diplomatic outreach, enhanced surveillance protocols, and defensive positioning of Council vessels. Each option assumed that rational communication and peaceful solutions remained possible despite the unprovoked destruction of an exploration vessel. Dr. Vasquez studied the proposed responses before requesting permission to offer alternative recommendations. Honorable delegates, the Council's proposed responses assume that we are dealing with species that share our commitment to rational dialogue and peaceful conflict resolution. The destruction of Harmony's quest suggests otherwise. What alternatives would you propose? Asked Prime Counselor Veltar. Immediate implementation of emergency defense protocols for all Council worlds, deployment of enhanced surveillance networks using human stealth detection technology, and preparation of rapid response forces capable of addressing threats that our conventional sensors cannot detect. Ambassador Keltam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Dr. Vasquez, your proposals assume that military solutions are preferable to diplomatic ones. Ambassador, I propose military preparations while diplomatic solutions are attempted. Our homeworld taught us that species unwilling to communicate before attacking are unlikely to communicate after attacking unless they encounter resistance they cannot easily overcome. The debate that followed reflected the fundamental tension that had characterized humanity's membership in the Council. Their strategic thinking consistently prepared for worst-case scenarios that other species prefer to ignore, while their solutions emphasized strength and preparedness in ways that challenge galactic civilization's optimistic assumptions. The immediate question, observed Ambassador Melvina, is whether we treat this as an isolated incident requiring investigation or as the opening move of a larger conflict requiring military response. Colonel Chun, who had remained silent throughout the initial presentations, requested permission to address this distinction. Ambassador Melvina, the targeting of an exploration vessel suggests intelligence about Council operations and capabilities. Random aggression would more likely target commercial or civilian vessels. The destruction of Harmony's quest represents a calculated assessment of our response capabilities. Explain your reasoning, Prime Counselor Veltar requested. Exploration vessels carry the most advanced sensor equipment and communication arrays in the Council fleet. By destroying such a vessel, the attackers accomplished three objectives. They eliminated our best tool for gathering intelligence about their capabilities, they demonstrated the ineffectiveness of our defensive systems, and they sent a message about their technological superiority. The logic was sound and disturbing. If Colonel Chin's assessment was correct, the attack represented sophisticated strategic thinking rather than random violence. What would you recommend based on this analysis? Asked Prime Counselor Veltar. Dr. Vasquez and Colonel Chun exchanged glances before Dr. Vasquez responded. Prime Counselor, we recommend treating this attack as reconnaissance by force. The unknown species is testing Council response capabilities and decision-making processes. Our response would determine whether they view us as a threat requiring careful approach or as victims suitable for further aggression. And what response would discourage further aggression? Inquired Ambassador Zorthike. Immediate deployment of our most advanced defensive systems and clear demonstration that attacks against Council vessels will result in swift and overwhelming retaliation, Colonel Chun replied without hesitation. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. Humanity was advocating for exactly the type of aggressive response that galactic civilization had spent millennia avoiding. Their recommendations challenged the foundational principles upon which the Council's peaceful coexistence had been built. Dr. Vasquez, Prime Counselor Veltar, said carefully, your proposal essentially advocates for war against an unknown species based on a single attack. Prime Counselor, we advocate for deterrence. War occurs when potential aggressors believe their targets are weak enough to attack without significant cost. Demonstrating strength prevents war more effectively than demonstrating weakness invites it. Counselor Thiven leaned forward, his expression troubled. Yet if we respond militarily to this attack, are we not abandoning the principles that have maintained galactic peace for centuries? Dr. Vasquez paused before responding, her expression reflecting the weight of the question. Counselor, those principles work because all current Council members share them. They create a framework for peaceful interaction among species that choose peace. But they provide no protection against species that choose violence. The universe contains both types of species, Colonel Chen added. The Council's success has come from creating a community of the first type while hoping never to encounter the second type. The hope may have just ended. As the emergency session continued, additional reports arrived from across Council space. 3 more exploration vessels had gone missing in different sectors, their disappearances following the same pattern. No distress signals, no debris, no trace of advanced starships that had simply vanished from sensor networks. The scale of these attacks suggests coordinated action across multiple sectors, observed Ambassador Melvina. We are not dealing with isolated incidents. Dr. Vasquez requested access to the tactical displays. If I may demonstrate the pattern emerging from these attacks. She manipulated the holographic star charts, highlighting the locations of attacked and missing vessels. The pattern that emerged was unmistakably strategic. The unknown attackers were systematically eliminating Council surveillance capabilities along specific vectors that led toward core Council worlds. The attacks are preparing corridors of approach toward our most important systems, she explained. By eliminating our sensor networks and exploration vessels, they're creating blind spots that will allow undetected movement toward critical targets. The implications sent a wave of concern through the assembled delegates. The unknown species was not conducting random attacks, but rather systematic preparation for larger operations. Based on this pattern, what would you estimate as their next likely targets? Asked Prime Counselor Veltar. Colonel Chin studied the display before responding. Communications, relay stations, defensive installations, and major population centers. They will continue eliminating our ability to coordinate responses while positioning forces for simultaneous attacks across multiple systems. How long do we have before such attacks become possible? Dr. Vasquez performed rapid calculations using the display data. Based on current elimination rates and the strategic pattern, approximately 6 standard weeks before they achieve optimal positioning for major operations. The time frame was shockingly short. 6 weeks to prepare for potential conflicts that could devastate galactic civilization, fought against opponents whose capabilities and intentions remained largely unknown. Honorable delegates, Prime Counselor Veltar announced, we face decisions that will determine the survival of our civilization. I call for immediate recess to allow all species representatives to consult with their homeworld governments regarding appropriate responses to this crisis. As delegates began filing out of the emergency session chamber, Dr. Vasquez approached Kethvar. Ambassador, humanity is prepared to share our defensive technologies and strategic capabilities with any council members willing to coordinate resistance against these attacks. Dr. Vasquez, such coordination would require authorization that goes beyond your conditional membership status. Ambassador, conditional membership becomes irrelevant if there is no council left to maintain membership in. Humanity offers our capabilities now because waiting for bureaucratic authorization may result in there being no one left to authorize anything. Kethvar found himself once again confronting the fundamental challenge that humanity represented. Their logic was sound, their capabilities were needed, and their willingness to act was unquestionable. Yet accepting their leadership in the crisis would fundamentally alter the nature of galactic civilization. What specific assistance is humanity prepared to offer? Complete technological integration of defensive systems, strategic planning based on our military analysis capabilities, and, if necessary, direct military intervention using capabilities that we have not previously shared with the Council. Capabilities that you have not shared? Dr. Vasquez's expression grew serious. Ambassador, humanity's conditional membership required us to share defensive technologies. We were not required to share offensive capabilities. Given the current crisis, we are prepared to make those capabilities available for collective defense. The revelation that humanity possessed military technologies beyond what they had already demonstrated sent a chill through Kethvar's consciousness. Their conditional membership had been based on council oversight of their known capabilities, but it appeared those capabilities were more extensive than anyone had realized. Dr. Vasquez, exactly what capabilities are you referring to? Weapons systems designed to address threats that conventional diplomacy cannot resolve. Technologies developed from our homeworld assumption that survival sometimes requires capabilities that civilized species prefer not to possess. As the emergency session recessed and delegates dispersed to consult with their respective governments, Kethvar found himself grappling with questions that had no comfortable answers. Humanity had warned from the beginning that the galaxy contained threats that peaceful civilizations were unprepared to face. Now those threats appeared to be materializing, and the only species equipped to respond was the one that galactic civilization had been most reluctant to fully accept. The next few weeks would determine whether the Council possessed the wisdom to embrace uncomfortable necessities or whether their commitment to peaceful principles would prevent them from surviving the challenges that those principles could not resolve. Humanity stood ready to lead galactic civilization through its first true crisis, but only if that civilization could accept what leadership might require. As Kethvar prepared to draft his emergency recommendations to the Council leadership, he could not escape the feeling that the galaxy's age of innocence was ending. The stars continued their eternal dance, but the civilizations beneath their light were about to discover what survival demanded when peace was no longer an option. The war came exactly as humanity had predicted. Kethvar stood in the ruins of what had once been the Council's premier diplomatic facility on Nexus Prime, surveying damage that defied comprehension. The attack had lasted less than 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes had shattered 1,000 years of galactic peace and transformed the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization. The unknown attackers had emerged from hyperspace simultaneously across 17 different systems, their ships appearing without warning despite the enhanced surveillance networks that the Council had desperately implemented during the 6 weeks following humanity's warnings. The weapons they employed operated on principles that Council science could not explain, disintegrating matter at the molecular level while leaving no residual energy signatures. 53 billion sentient beings had died in the initial assault. 12 member species had been completely exterminated, their homeworlds rendered lifeless rocks orbiting silent stars. The survivors existed now only because humanity had acted without waiting for Council authorization. Ambassador Dr. Vasquez approached through the debris field that had once been the station's central courtyard, her environmental suit bearing scorch marks from the recent battle. The fleet reports are ready for your review. Kethvar activated his suit's communication systems, grateful for the technology that allowed normal conversation despite the facility's compromised atmosphere. How many vessels did we lose? 1,437 Council ships destroyed in the initial wave. Another 800 severely damaged and unable to continue operations. Dr. Vasquez paused, her expression grim behind the transparent aluminum faceplate. Without human intervention, the casualty figures would have been total. The numbers were staggering. In less than a day, the peaceful galaxy that Kethvar had served for 3 centuries had been transformed into a battlefield where survival depended on capabilities that civilized species had never needed to develop. And the human losses? 23 vessels destroyed, 41 damaged. Our stealth technology and weapons systems proved effective against the attackers, but their numerical superiority was overwhelming. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display that showed the current tactical situation across Council space. Red zones marked systems under attack or already destroyed, yellow indicated areas where fighting continued, and green showed regions still under Council control. The amount of red was terrifying. The attackers have identified themselves as the hegemony of absolute dominion, she continued. Their communication, when they've bothered to provide any, indicated that they view all other intelligent species as resources to be harvested or obstacles to be eliminated. No possibility of negotiation? None. They respond to diplomatic overtures with increased aggression. Our homeworld prepared us for the reality that some species cannot be reasoned with, only defeated or survived. Kethvar studied the tactical display, noting how humanity's military doctrine had been forced to adapt rapidly to threats that exceeded even their pessimistic assumptions. The humans had revealed weapons and strategies that demonstrated preparation for scenarios that no other species had considered possible. Dr. Vasquez, when you spoke of offensive capabilities that humanity had not shared with the Council, exactly what technologies were you referring to? Her expression grew serious. Weapons designed to fight wars that civilized species hope will never occur. Strategies developed from the assumption that our species might someday face extinction-level threats that could only be defeated through overwhelming force applied without restraint. She manipulated the holographic display, to show schematic representations of human weapons systems that had been deployed against the hegemony forces. The technology was decades beyond anything the Council had developed, operating on principles that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Antimatter weaponry, quantum disruption fields, gravitational manipulation systems, and temporal distortion devices, Dr. Vasquez listed clinically. Our homeworld taught us that survival sometimes requires capabilities that peaceful civilizations find morally objectionable. These weapons could destroy entire star systems, Kethvar observed, his voice reflecting the horror of such implications. Yes, they were designed specifically for that purpose, in case humanity ever faced threats that required system-scale responses. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. The hegemony of absolute dominion represents exactly such a threat. The revelation that humanity possessed weapons capable of stellar destruction sent a chill through Kethvar's consciousness that had nothing to do with the station's compromised environmental systems. The species that the Council had reluctantly accepted as members had been concealing capabilities that could reshape galactic geography. Why did you not reveal these capabilities during your membership evaluation? Because revealing them would have ensured our rejection. The Council was barely willing to accept our defensive technologies. Knowledge that we possessed offensive systems capable of destroying civilizations would have been unacceptable to species committed to peaceful solutions. Yet you developed such weapons nonetheless. Dr. Vasquez's expression softened slightly. Ambassador, our homeworld taught us that the universe contains threats that cannot be negotiated with, reasoned with, or peacefully coexisted with. We hoped we would never encounter such threats, but we prepared for the possibility that we might. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from Admiral Sarah Chun, Colonel Chen's sister, who had assumed command of the Unified Resistance Fleet. Her image appeared in the portable holographic projector, her face bearing the stress marks of someone who had been coordinating desperate battles across multiple star systems. Ambassador, Dr. Vasquez, we have a developing situation that requires immediate decision-making authority. Hegemony forces have positioned themselves for a final assault on Earth and the core Council worlds. Intelligence suggests they possess weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets within hours. Kethvar felt his exoskeleton contract involuntarily. The scope of the threat exceeded anything he had imagined possible when first encountering humanity 2 years earlier. What are our defensive options? Limited, Admiral Chun replied bluntly. Conventional resistance has proven inadequate against their technology. We could delay their advance, but we cannot stop at using methods that the Council would consider acceptable. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Sarah, are you referring to the Omega Protocols? Yes. It's the only strategic option that offers genuine hope of stopping the hegemony advance. But implementation requires authorization from Council leadership, and such authorization would fundamentally alter the nature of galactic civilization. Kethvar's linguistic processors struggled to parse the implications of weapons systems designated with terms like Omega Protocols. The naming convention alone suggested technologies designed for scenarios where conventional solutions had failed completely. Admiral Chun, what exactly are the Omega Protocols? The pause that followed was lengthy, as if the Admiral was carefully considering how to explain concepts that no civilized species had ever needed to contemplate. Ambassador, the Omega Protocols represent humanity's final contingency for species-level threats. They involve weapons and strategies that guarantee victory at costs that most civilizations would consider unacceptable. What costs? Dr. Vasquez answered for the Admiral. The complete destruction of entire star systems, the elimination of all life within targeted sectors, and the potential reshaping of galactic geography to deny resources to enemy forces. The implications were staggering. Humanity was proposing to save galactic civilization by employing weapons that could destroy significant portions of the galaxy itself. The cure might prove worse than the disease, yet without it, the disease would certainly prove fatal. How many systems would be affected by these protocols? Estimates suggest between 30 and 50 star systems would be rendered uninhabitable, Admiral Chen replied. However, those systems are already under hegemony control or scheduled for imminent attack. We would be destroying systems that are lost anyway, while preventing the hegemony from using their resources for further expansion. Kethvar found himself grappling with moral and ethical questions that his 3 centuries of diplomatic experience had never prepared him to address. The choice was between certain galactic extinction under hegemony rule or survival through methods that violated every principle upon which galactic civilization had been built. Admiral, what guarantees exist that humanity would not use these weapons against surviving council members after defeating the hegemony? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everything that had brought humanity to the council's attention, their capabilities, their survival instincts, their willingness to make difficult choices, now raised the specter of whether they could be trusted with the power to reshape galactic civilization. Dr. Vasquez's response was immediate and unequivocal. Ambassador, humanity developed these capabilities to protect civilized species, not to dominate them. If we had wanted galactic conquest, we would have begun that process 2 years ago when we first encountered the Council. Instead, we sought membership and cooperation. Yet possessing such weapons changes the fundamental balance of power in ways that cannot be reversed, Kethvar observed. Ambassador, Admiral Chun interjected, the fundamental balance of power has already been changed by the hegemony. The question is not whether we preserve the old balance, but whether we create a new balance that allows civilized species to survive. As if summoned by the weight of their conversation, Prime Counselor Veltar's image appeared in the communication array. Her crystalline features reflected damage from whatever battles had reached the Council's temporary headquarters, but her voice retained its characteristic authority. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Vasquez, the surviving Council members have reached a consensus regarding humanity's proposal to implement the Omega Protocols. The pause that followed was pregnant with the weight of galactic history. Whatever decision the Council had reached would determine not just the outcome of the war, but the nature of the civilization that emerged from it. The Council authorizes immediate implementation of all necessary measures to ensure the survival of member species. Humanity is granted unrestricted authority to deploy whatever capabilities are required to defeat the hegemony of absolute dominion. Dr. Vasquez nodded solemnly. Prime Counselor, humanity accepts this responsibility. We will ensure that the hegemony threat is eliminated and that galactic civilization survives, regardless of the costs involved. God help us all, Prime Counselor Veltar whispered before her image faded. The next 72 hours witnessed warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Humanity's Omega protocols transformed entire star systems into weapons, using principles of physics that other species could barely comprehend. Stellar engineering on an unprecedented scale created barriers of impossible energy that no force could penetrate. Gravity itself became a weapon, crushing hegemony fleets in fields that compress space and time beyond the limits of matter to exist. Kethvar observed the final battles from aboard the human flagship, Indomitable Will, a vessel that appeared to be constructed from materials that did not fully exist in normal space-time. The ship's weapons operated by rewriting local reality, making enemy vessels simply cease to exist rather than destroying them through conventional energy transfer. The last hegemony stronghold is located in the Andromeda Approach, Admiral Chun reported during what would prove to be the final strategic briefing of the war. Intelligence suggests they have concentrated their remaining forces around a construct that appears to be harvesting energy directly from the galactic core. Their purposes? Asked Dr. Vasquez. Unknown, but the energy levels involved suggest capabilities that could threaten the entire local galactic cluster. Whatever they are building, it represents an escalation beyond anything we have encountered so far. Kethvar studied the tactical displays showing the final hegemony position. The construct they had built defied understanding, appearing to exist partially outside normal space while drawing unimaginable energy from sources that should have been inaccessible to any technology. What response do the Omega protocols recommend for such a target? Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances with Admiral Chun before responding. Complete stellar destabilization of the entire region. We collapse the local space-time continuum and sever that section of the galaxy from the rest of normal space. The energy release from such an operation would be visible across half the observable universe, Kethvar observed. Yes, it would also eliminate any possibility that hegemony technology could be recovered or reverse-engineered by future threats. Sometimes, Ambassador, survival requires ensuring that certain knowledge dies with those who would misuse it. The final battle lasted less than an hour. Humanity's ultimate weapons reached across space to touch the hegemony stronghold, and Reality itself shuddered as fundamental forces were redirected and manipulated beyond all natural limits. When the energy discharge is cleared, an entire sector of space had been replaced by a zone of absolute emptiness where neither matter nor energy could exist. The hegemony of absolute dominion was gone. Not defeated, not destroyed, but erased from existence so completely that no trace of their technology or knowledge remained in the universe. The threat they had represented to galactic civilization had been eliminated with finality that left no possibility of resurrection or return. Yet as Kethvar stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship, watching the slowly expanding void where an entire stellar region had once existed, he found himself wondering what the galaxy had become in the process of surviving the war. Dr. Vasquez, he asked quietly, what happens now? Humanity possesses weapons that can reshape galactic geography and the knowledge of how to use them. The other species are grateful for our survival, but they also fear what you might do with such capabilities. Dr. Vasquez joined him at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the artificial emptiness that marked the war's end. Ambassador, our homeworld taught us that with great power comes great responsibility. These weapons exist now, and that cannot be changed. But they exist in the hands of a species that understands the terrible weight of wielding them. How can other species trust that understanding will not change as circumstances evolve? Because, she replied simply, we have learned that survival without wisdom leads to becoming the very threat we fought to defeat. Humanity will guard these capabilities carefully, use them only when absolutely necessary, and work to ensure that such necessity never arises again. Admiral Chun approached them, her expression reflecting the exhaustion of someone who had coordinated the complete destruction of an interstellar civilization. Ambassador Dr. Vasquez, we have preliminary damage assessments from across Council space. 87 star systems destroyed or rendered uninhabitable, over 200 billion sentient beings lost, and 13 species extinct. The cost of victory was staggering, almost incomprehensible in its scope. Yet as Kethvar contemplated the alternative, complete galactic domination by a force that viewed all other life as expendable resources, he realized that humanity's terrible choices had been necessary ones. The reconstruction phase will require resources and coordination on a scale never before attempted. Admiral Chin continued. Humanity is prepared to contribute our technologies and capabilities to rebuilding what was lost, including the weapons technologies that won the war. Kethvar asked. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. The Omega protocols remain humanity's responsibility alone. They are too dangerous to be shared and too necessary to be destroyed. We will guard them as we once guarded our own survival, ensuring they're used only when all other options have failed. As the human fleet began its journey back toward the surviving Council worlds, Kethvar reflected on the transformation that the galaxy had undergone during his encounter with humanity. They had arrived as applicants seeking membership in a peaceful civilization. They departed as the guardians of that civilization's continued existence, bearing weapons and knowledge that placed them beyond the reach of any possible challenge. The war had ended, but the galaxy would never again be the innocent place it had been before humanity's arrival. The stars continued their eternal dance, but the civilizations beneath their light now existed under the protection of beings who understood the full cost of survival in a universe that was not always kind to the peaceful or the unprepared. Years later, when historians attempted to understand how the galaxy had survived its greatest crisis, they would focus on humanity's technological superiority and strategic brilliance. But Kethvar knew that the real victory had been humanity's decision to seek membership in galactic civilization rather than simply taking control of it. They had possessed the capability to dominate from their first encounter with the Council. Instead, they had chosen cooperation until circumstances made dominance the only alternative to extinction. In making that choice, they had preserved not just the lives of countless billions, but the essential character of galactic civilization itself. The universe was vast and full of unknowable threats. But as long as humanity stood guard with their terrible weapons and hard-earned wisdom, the light of civilization would continue to shine among the stars, protected by those who understood that some sacrifices were necessary to preserve everything worth protecting. The war was over. Humanity had won, and in winning, they had become exactly what the galaxy needed them to become. Guardians willing to bear burdens that others could not carry, defenders prepare to make choices that civilized species hoped would never be necessary. The stars danced on, and beneath their light, civilization endured.